In a town forgotten by time, where trouble rides in with the wind and legends fade slower than scars, they chose the wrong person to provoke, and by the time they realized, it was already too late. The morning sun had barely kissed the horizon when the hammer fell on Alira Thorne's life. Her home, a battered cabin on the edge of Gray Hollow, reeked of wood smoke and yesterday's sorrow. The fireplace was cold. The cradle was empty. Alira stood barefoot in the dirt outside the doorway, her copper hair unkempt and stuck to her cheeks with sweat and dried tears. In her trembling arms were 2 sleeping newborns, swaddled in a faded quilt. Their soft breaths rose and fell against her collarbone like fragile truths. A man named Corbin Drexler dismounted his horse, the debt collector. He wore gray gloves and a smile that never touched his eyes. "Clock's run out, Miss Thorne," he said, brushing dust off his jacket. "No payment, no collateral, and yet here you are, still breathing." Alira's voice cracked. "Please, just a few more days. The crops will come in, I swear." Drexler turned his head slightly, as if bored of the plea before it even left her lips. His boots crunched on frostbitten grass as he walked past her into the cabin without asking. He emerged moments later with a ledger tucked beneath one arm and a bottle of whiskey from the shelf in the other. "The debt's in your husband's name," he said, squinting into the rising sun. "But he's long since rotted. That means it passes to you, or in this case ... He glanced at the infants. Alira stepped back instinctively, clutching them tighter. Drexler lifted a single brow. "They'll do." The scream that tore from her lungs startled the crows from the trees, but no one came. Gray Hollow was a town of silence, a place where decency had packed its bags and fled generations ago. A few window shutters creaked open. A couple faces peeked out. But the doors stayed locked. No one interfered when the Drexler men took what they wanted. "You can't!" Alira shouted. "They're mine," Drexler smiled wider. "No, Miss Thorne. They were his, and he owed." The twins began to cry. She held them closer. "You'll have to kill me first. If it were up to me, I would." That voice didn't come from Drexler. It came from the woods. The air shifted. Trees whispered. And then he stepped into the clearing. His name wasn't known to the folk of Gray Hollow. Not yet. Tall, weathered, shirt stained with old blood and time. His left leg dragged slightly, but it did not slow him. He wore a feather on one shoulder, a knife at his belt, and a gaze that made Corbin Drexler freeze mid-sentence. Alira turned, her body a wall between her children and the stranger. But he didn't look at her. Not at first. His eyes, dark as storm clouds and deeper than regret, never left Drexler. "Put the ledger down," he said, "and walk away." Drexler laughed, but it sounded more like a cough. "You got no badge, no papers, no say." "I've got claim." "To what?" The man finally looked at Alira. The connection was instant, though she didn't understand why. He stepped forward. "To them." The air snapped. Drexler's laughter died in his throat. Alira felt like she was floating. "Who ... Who are you?" He answered, without blinking. "Their father." Now, a long silence followed. Only the soft wind spoke. Drexler's eyes narrowed. "You lying sack of 'em want to test it?" The man pulled his coat aside, not to reveal a gun. A scar. It ran across his chest like lightning had tried to rip him open and changed its mind halfway through. And below it, tattoos, Cherokee markings. "Names. You don't want to do this," Drexler warned. "But I will." The stranger stepped between Alira and the debt collector, just as a gust of wind blew down the chimney, scattering ash over the embers of her once normal life. The twins stopped crying. Corbin Drexler stared, then stepped back. "This isn't over. It is for you." He mounted his horse, but not before muttering, "She was sold fair. I got witnesses. I got bullets." And that was it. Drexler rode off. Alira stood frozen, breath held hostage by fear and disbelief. The man finally turned to her. "I don't know you," she whispered. "You will." "Why?" He looked down at the babies in her arms, then back up. "Because the world's not going to raise them right, but I will." She should have been afraid. Every instinct screamed it. But something in her recognized him, something deeper than blood. "What's your name?" He hesitated, and said it like a confession. "Kalen." The name burned itself into her memory like fire into flesh. Kalen, the wounded Cherokee. Kalen, who claimed what no one else dared, and so it began. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." The fire crackled low that night, casting Callan's shadow long across the worn floorboards of the cabin. Elira sat near the hearth, the twins cradled beside her in the cradle Drexler had nearly robbed them of. She hadn't spoken in hours, not since Kalen brought in firewood with that quiet calmness that made it all feel like less of a storm and more of a silence before one. Outside, Gray Hollow slept. Or pretended to. She watched him move, slow, deliberate. A man with a limp, but not a weakness. He didn't limp like a man broken. He limped like a man who knew every step mattered. "You're not Cherokee," she said finally, voice hushed by flickering flame. He didn't look at her. Just knelt beside the fire and added another log. Sparks jumped like tiny spirits and disappeared. "I am. On my mother's side. You don't talk like one." He met her gaze. "Most folks don't talk like where they come from. They talk like where they've been." She wasn't sure if it was wisdom or warning. "You risked a lot back there," she whispered, arms curling tighter around her chest. "Drexler doesn't let go of what he thinks he owns. He'll be back." "I know. And still, you said they were yours." Kalen didn't flinch. "I meant it. You don't even know their names." He stared into the fire for a long time. "Elin and Sela." She froze. Her breath caught. "I saw the carving on the mantel," he added softly. "Wasn't guessing." "You remembered." He finally stood, stretching slowly like the weight on his shoulders had settled deeper with every hour of quiet. Don't need to know everything to protect something. Sometimes it's enough to just see what others won't. Elira blinked against the rising emotion. "You talk like someone who's already buried the worst part of himself." "I have." She looked down at her lap. "So have I." Kalen didn't speak again that night, just took the chair by the window, rifle across his lap, and stared into the darkness like it owed him answers. The sun rose gray dot, not soft, not gentle. Just there, like it didn't care. Elira stirred the weak coffee over the stove while the twins slept. Her hands trembled, not from cold, from knowing. "He'll come back," she said. "With others." Kalen didn't answer. He sat outside sharpening a blade that looked older than either of them. He always does. "He'll tell the sheriff they were legally his." "He won't." She stepped outside, barefoot on the porch. The frost bit her heels. Why not? Kalen stopped sharpening because he didn't expect to be scared. Elira stared at him, and now he is. They didn't talk after that dot, but it was enough. Gray Hollow was always suspicious of miracles. When something good happened, folks waited for the other boot to drop. And when someone stood against Drexler, they didn't cheer. They hid. It was nearly noon when they arrived, 3 riders. Drexler wasn't among them. These were hired hands, paid in gold or blood. Didn't matter which. They dismounted with the casual cruelty of men who didn't fear consequence. Kalen watched from the roof. He hadn't told Elira, didn't need to. She knew when he brought the cradle inside and nailed the door shut. When he whispered the children's names like a shield and handed her the rifle. "You've done this before," she said. He nodded. "You going to kill them?" "If I have to. But what if you die?" Kalen smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Then they'll have to learn." Faster than I did, the first man knocked. No subtlety. Just a boot against wood. Come out, he barked. Ain't got time to play games with ghosts. Kalen answered with silence. The second man drew his pistol. I said come out. Then Kalen dropped from the roof. A thud. A crack. A scream dot by. The time the others turned, the first was already down. His gun gone. His face a mess of blood and bark. Kalen didn't run. He didn't need to. The second man shot wild. Missed. Kalen's blade kissed his neck before he could curse. The third. Bolted. Always one who runs. Kalen let him. He wasn't trying to make corpses. He was sending a message. Back in the cabin, Alira held the twins and prayed, not to a god, but to a future she hadn't dared dream of. When Kalen returned, blood on his shirt and calm in his stride, she didn't speak, didn't need to. She handed him a cloth. He cleaned his hands. Then the wind carried the sound of hooves. One rider. Alone. Drexler. Kalon stepped out to meet him. Drexler dismounted with the arrogance of a man still convinced money could solve anything. You made your point, he said. But they're still mine. No. Drexler's hand hovered near his belt. You going to raise them in that shack? Let them starve in the woods? They'll grow with love, which is more than your pockets ever gave anyone. You think this is over? Kalen walked forward. Not fast, not threatening, just enough. I know it is, for you. Drexler laughed. You don't get to decide. Kalen raised his hand, not in threat, but to show the mark, tattooed across his palm. Name, a clan, a blood right. You ride again toward this cabin, and you ride into your own ending. The sun slipped behind a cloud. The wind turned. Drexler stared at that palm, like it held fire. Then he left. Alira didn't ask what the symbol meant. She knew enough to understand it wasn't a warning. It was a vow. And that night, she sat beside Kalen on the porch, the twins sleeping between them, and said the only truth she had left. I believe you. He didn't smile, didn't need to. She had seen it in his eyes the moment he walked from the woods. He had nothing left to prove, just everything to protect. The next day dawned harder. Not colder, not darker, just harder. Alira knew what that meant. It meant the town had made up its mind. Gray Hollow was a place that measured survival in glances and silence. And after what happened yesterday, Kalen dropped two men like stones and let a third ride off with stories on his tongue. Every shutter stayed shut a little tighter. No one came to check on them. Not the preacher, not the sheriff, not even Martha Frayne, who once nursed Alira through her first childbirth. Nobody brought bread. Nobody brought judgment. They just vanished. Kalen split wood with one arm. The wound on his shoulder from long ago had flared up. Alira could tell, but he made no sound, gave no sign. He worked with the quiet intensity of a man who had learned long ago that showing pain gave others permission to aim for it. You don't rest. Alira said it like an observation, not a complaint. Kalen paused only briefly. I rest when they're safe. She watched from the porch, arms crossed beneath the shawl Drexler hadn't taken. The twins cooed inside, unaware that their fates were being hammered into shape just beyond the door. Kalen stacked the last log. She stepped down. You can't protect them forever. He turned to her. The scar on his cheek caught the light. No, he said, just long enough. She didn't ask what that meant. Just walked back inside and shut the door gently. 3 days passed. Word reached other ears, not just of Kalen, but of what he said, of how he stood. The rumors ran faster than facts ever could, that a Cherokee ghost had risen in Gray Hollow, that he'd claimed a dead girl and her twins and carved her name into his own skin, that Drexler was scared enough to ride alone and return empty. By the fourth day, others began to arrive. Not men like Drexler. Worse. Buyers. Gray Hollow's secrets ran deep, and not all debts were paid with money. Some were settled in people. Men with black hats and silver buckles came to town. They didn't ask for names. They asked for assets. And Alira was one. So were the twins. Kalen saw them before they spoke a word. They gathered in the saloon, which had been locked since the last shooting, but open for gold. 5 of them, all smelling of smoke and control, none younger than 40. All of them dead behind the eyes. Kalen stood outside the doors, didn't knock, didn't warn. Just opened them and let silence fall across the room like a blade. The tallest turned. "You, the Indian?" Kalen said nothing. "Thought you'd be bigger." Kalen didn't move. "Heard you stole a woman and some brats from a debt collector. That true?" Still Kalen said nothing. Then the man pulled out a ledger, fat and red. "We're here to square up. The girl was sold fair, twins too. Names are inked in this book. That makes them property." Kalen stepped forward once, slow, deliberate. "Say that again." The man blinked. "Which part?" "The last. I said they were property." Kalen's fist met the man's mouth before the others could draw. Teeth and blood hit the floor. The ledger flew across the room. A second man reached for his belt. Kalen twisted his arm behind him, slammed him against the wall, and whispered something none of the others could hear. The man pissed himself, collapsed. 2 more backed away. The 5th simply watched. Not scared, not eager, just curious. Kalen left them there. On the porch later, Alira asked him what he said to the one who pissed himself. Kalen didn't answer. She didn't ask again. That night the twins cried, not from hunger, not from fear, from a world they didn't understand, and a mother who didn't know how to tell them it wasn't their fault. Alira rocked them slowly. Kalen watched from the doorway. "You think I'm weak," she said without looking. "No." "You think I can't protect them?" "No. But you don't trust me to double quote silence. She turned. "You didn't let me shoot. You always step in first." "Why?" Kalen walked forward. Sat near the cradle. "I'm not used to sharing a fight." She laughed, but it was hollow. "You think this is sharing?" Kalen didn't smile. Just placed his hand beside hers on the cradle's edge. "You think I stepped in for you, but I stepped in for them." That hit something in her. A note too close to the bone. She breathed through it. Soft, shaky. "I thought I could do it. Make a life. Build something out of nothing. But he left me in the dirt, and the town turned their faces." Kalen waited. "You ever been nothing?" she asked. He nodded. "For a long time. Did you become something?" "No. I became someone who learned not to need to." She looked at him then, not like a stranger, like a mirror. They stayed there silent, just long enough for the fire to burn lower, just long enough for the wind to howl without reply. In the following days, Gray Hollow began to split. Some sided with Drexler. Some didn't. Some wished they'd never heard the name Kalen. Some started whispering it like a prayer. A few came forward. Not to help, but to ask, "How did you stop him? Did he bleed? Will he come back?" Kalen gave no answers, but they came anyway. A woman with 2 sons and an old bruise. A man whose daughter had vanished into a ledger 3 years back. A boy whose mother had been traded for a mule and 6 bullets. Each of them sat on the porch at different times. None of them stayed, but they all looked at Alira the same way, like she was already something more, the woman who bore the twins. The one who hadn't run, and the man who stood beside her. He became legend, but she became something rarer. A reason. And one night, as the wind whipped hard enough to rattle the glass, as Kalen loaded a fresh shell into the rifle and Alira wrapped the twins in thicker blankets, she spoke with a fire in her voice she hadn't used since before her husband died. "If they come back, they won't find me on my knees." Kalen didn't reply, didn't need to. She handed him the last bullet and smiled. But it wasn't kindness. It was readiness. Outside, a new kind of storm was building. Not wind, not rain. Something made of boots and dust and the sound of a town deciding whether to bury its sins or set them on fire. Alira opened the window, just a crack, enough to feel the cold, and whispered to the twins, "Sleep deep, my hearts. Tomorrow we fight for your names." And behind her, Kaelin stood tall, not as a guardian, but as a witness to a woman becoming more than anyone dared allow her to be. The next morning didn't begin with light. It began with sound, hammering, slow, rhythmic, unmistakable. Kaelin stood before sunrise, sharpening blades on the porch, not out of need, out of habit. But the sound from the center of town pulled him to stillness. 3 houses down, at the crossroads where the church met the market, men were building something. A platform. Alira watched from the window, the twins still swaddled against her chest. "They're not even hiding it anymore," she whispered. Kaelin didn't respond. He knew exactly what it was. A gallows didn't always need a noose. Sometimes the wood alone sent the message. The sheriff was nowhere to be seen. Hadn't been for 2 days. Maybe gone. Maybe paid. Maybe just waiting for someone else to bleed first. But the mayor stood at the edge of the build. Elias Cray. He watched Kaelin as if daring him to move, to speak, to interrupt. Kaelin turned back toward the cabin. "Don't go into town today," he told Alira. She didn't argue. By noon, the gallows were finished, and by dusk, so was the message. Cray posted it himself on the chapel door. "All debts settled by dusk 3 days hence. Non-payment will be considered forfeiture of rights and assets." Underneath, in smaller ink, "No exceptions." Kaelin read it, folded it, burned it. Gray Hollow didn't write laws anymore. It wrote threats. And this one wore Cray's signature. "What's he planning?" Alira asked later, as Kaelin loaded bullets into a canvas pouch. "He's pushing, seeing who flinches first. And if we don't?" Kaelin looked at her. "Then we see who bleeds first." The second night brought movement. Not an attack, not an army, a parade. 5 carriages, ornate, quiet, curtains drawn. Kaelin watched them pass with narrowed eyes. Not Drexler's men, not even Cray's. New blood, outsiders with eyes that knew what souls cost. They entered the mayor's home and did not leave. Alira wrapped the twins tighter. She could feel it now. Not just danger, pressure, like the air itself was being pushed through a funnel. "They're preparing something," she said. "Something big," Kaelin nodded. "They know we're not leaving. So they're trying something else." "What?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know yet. The third day, someone knocked. Not Kellen's door, not Alira's. Every door, one by one. Gray Hollow's citizens were called upon to attend, to observe, to choose. Cray had made it mandatory. A town meeting. In the square, beneath the gallows, Kaelin strapped on the knife at his hip. The rifle stayed leaning near the door. "You'll go?" Alira asked. "I'll listen. You trust them not to try something?" "I don't trust them to be smart enough not to." She smiled grimly. "Then I'll keep the door open." Kaelin walked to town alone, but eyes followed him. Children peeked through shutters. Old men paused on porches. Mothers held infants tighter. By the time he reached the square, the whole town had gathered. Even the preacher stood near the back, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Cray waited on the platform. Behind him stood the 5 men from the carriages. Clean coats, pale faces, no dust on their boots. Outsiders. Cray raised a hand. "Friends," he said, as if anyone there had ever called him that. "This town has suffered drought, bandits, starvation, but we've survived because we've kept order." Kaelin said nothing. "Just watch." Cray continued. "Some debts are unpaid. Some decisions have brought trouble to our door. Trouble we can't afford." A murmur ran through the crowd. No one looked at Kaelin, but everyone knew. These men, Cray gestured behind him, offer a way forward. A return to prosperity. But they demand we pay what we owe. As do I. One of the pale men stepped forward. No introduction. No title, just words, cold as January. You are allowed to govern yourselves, but not to break contract. A life is a price. It was signed. It must be paid. Kalen felt his teeth grind. The man went on, the woman and her twins. We do not want them dead. We want them delivered. We are fair. We are legal. He smiled then, but it wasn't a smile. It was possession. Cray looked out over the crowd. She has 3 days. After that, she forfeits protection. He didn't say it, but everyone heard it. She forfeits her life. Kalen turned and walked away. He didn't wait. Didn't listen for whispers. He knew how mobs formed. Not with violence, with quiet agreement. That night, Elira didn't cry, didn't scream. She sat on the floor with the twins and whispered stories about stars. About a place where no man could own another. About a fire that burned in people like hers. Kalen sat nearby, sharpening the old knife. It didn't need to be sharpened, but he needed the rhythm. She asked him, just once, would you run with us? Kalen shook his head. They'd follow. They don't want justice. They want example. So what then? He looked out the window, toward the gallows. We break them. Day 4 began with silence. No birds. No hammering. No movement. And then dash fire. Not the cabin. The church. Kalen and Elira saw the smoke before they heard the screams. By the time they reached it, the chapel was ash and sparks. The preacher knelt outside, blood on his shirt. He pointed. Not at the quinta. Fire. At the wall behind what was once the altar. Burned into the wood. Obey a warning. Kalen helped him up. The man wept, not from pain, but from the realization that his God had been replaced by fear. Cray arrived an hour later. Looked at the ashes. Made no comment. Just turned and walked away. But Kalen saw it. In the stiff set of his shoulders, Cray wasn't afraid of the fire. He was afraid it hadn't worked. Elira held her children that night without a word. Kalen kept watch, not for invaders, for betrayal. It always came from within. And as the stars blinked into the sky, like witnesses too. Far to help, Elira asked, how do we stop them? Kalen didn't hesitate. We remind them what pain feels like. And somewhere deep inside Gray Hollow, someone else lit a match. One spark would not be enough. But enough sparks could burn down a kingdom. It was the 5th morning when Kalen buried the knife. He walked out to the tree line, where the old ash tree leaned crooked over the slope like it had grown drunk on thunder. The soil was soft there, still dark from the spring thaw. The blade went in deep. Cold steel and colder earth. All Ira watched from the porch, shawl pulled tight. Why? She asked. Kalen turned back, wiping his hands on his trousers. Because the next one I carry will be hotter. She didn't know what that meant, not yet. But something in his voice made her look down at the twins and murmur a prayer she hadn't spoken since she was a child. Kalen didn't pray. He planned. That day, the townspeople didn't pretend anymore. Doors weren't just shut, they were barricaded, windows darkened. No children in the streets. No wind chimes on porches. Gray Hollow had held its breath. Now it was waiting to exhale. Kalen sat at the old work table with a spread of items laid out like the remains of a life dissected. A length of barbed wire. A map from a surveyor's journal, years old but mostly true. A half-dozen bullets with X's carved into the brass. A pair of gloves with the fingers worn through. Elira came in quietly, carrying a tin of weak broth. You know what you're doing? He nodded. They made a mistake bringing outsiders in. They brought them for leverage. No, Kalen replied. They brought them because they're scared. And if they're not, he met her eyes, then they'll wish they were. The twins stirred in the corner. Elira set the broth down beside him. If you go, she whispered, you don't get to die. Kalen leaned forward, wrapping the barbed wire into a circle the size of his forearm. I won't. Nightfall. Quiet dot then dash movement dot a figure in the dark, approaching the cabin. Not fast. Careful. Kaylin opened the door before they reached it. Martha. Frayne stood at the edge of the porch, soaked in sweat, her dress torn at the hem. They're planning it, she gasped. Tomorrow they're taking her at dawn. Elira froze. Martha's eyes were wild. Cray gave word. The ones in the carriages, they want her publicly. A trade, for investment. Says it'll secure the future of the town. She looked ready. To break. He's selling her, she whispered. And the babies. Like it's grain, like it's cattle. Kaylin turned. His face was calm. But only on the outside. Who else knows? Martha shook her head. No one speaks up, but some won't watch it happen. Do they have guns? No, Kaylin picked up his. Then they have me. That night, Kaylin visited 5 homes, didn't knock, didn't call out, just walked to each doorstep and waited. Each time someone answered. Each time he said one sentence. If you don't speak now, you never will. Then he walked on. By midnight, he had a dozen. By 2. He had 20. Not fighters. Not soldiers. But people who had run out of places to hide. All IRA stayed behind. She fed the twins in silence. Rocked them until her arms ached. When Kaylin returned, he smelled like dust and flint. He knelt beside her. I'll lead, he said. But you need to finish it. She stared at him. You want me to fight? I want you to choose. That night, they slept back to back, weapons near their hands, and 1,000 fears between them. Dawn came like a blade. Cold. Straight. Without apology. Cray stood in the square again. But this time, he had help. The 5 outsiders flanked him. Behind them, 10 men with rifles. Not from town, hired. Bought. Kaylin saw them from the ridge. He saw everything. Elira stood at the cabin doorway, her breath misting in the light. They had sent a rider for her, a young boy, 17 maybe. Face like a broken promise. I'm supposed to bring you in, he said. If I don't, they'll do it anyway, she replied. Ride home, son. I don't want to. Oh, then don't. The boy turned. But slowly. Like he didn't believe he'd get far. He did, because no one followed. Kaylin appeared beside her. Ready? He asked. No, she said, but I'm done waiting. He handed her the rifle, the one with Sarah's initials burned into the stock. She took it like a crown. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The first shot wasn't fired by Kaylin. It came from inside the crowd. One of the townsfolk he spoke to. A quiet man with a limp and a bottle he'd long stopped filling with drink. He aimed at the gallows. The platform shattered. The beam split. And suddenly, there was no stage left to hang anyone from. Panic rippled. Kaylin stepped into view. Gun on his hip. Barbed wire wrapped around his right wrist like a gauntlet. The crowd parted. I walked behind him, rifle cradled like a child. Cray stepped forward. You can't stop this. Kaylin didn't blink. I already did. The outsiders raised their voices. This is violation of agreement, of contract, of order. Kaylin lifted the old map. Let it unfurl in the wind. This town sits on sovereign land. Cherokee soil. You signed no agreement. You stole it. And now you want to sell its people again. Cray reached for his gun. Kaylin shot first. Not to kill. Just enough to end the idea. Cray dropped. Hand bleeding, weapon lost. The outsiders scrambled. They weren't fast enough. Because by then, the townsfolk had moved. People Kaylin had spoken to. People who had hidden too long. They stood. Blocked paths. Raised old tools like weapons. Elia raised her rifle. Not this time, she said. Not again. And the people listened, not to Cray, not to Gold. To her. Because she wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a line in the sand. And that morning, Gray Hollow remembered its spine. Kalen stood still, calm, until every outsider dropped their guns. Then he walked to Cray. Bleeding and moaning. Knelt beside him. "This was your last debt," he said, and turned his back. Alira didn't speak until the square emptied. Then she walked to Kalen. The twins watched from the cabin porch in Martha's arms. "We did it," she whispered. "No," he replied. "You did," she laughed. "Just once," then handed him back the rifle. "We start over now?" Kalen looked at the sky, at the sun that dared show its face again. "No," he said. "Now we build." The days that followed weren't easy. Change never is. Gray Hollow didn't transform overnight. The gallows platform may have been broken, the rifles disarmed, and the fear fractured, but the roots of what had held the town in silence for years didn't snap that easily. They twisted underground, stubborn as shame. Kalen didn't expect celebration. He didn't want it. He walked through the dust like always, a shadow cast not by legend but by consistency. Hammered nails, repaired fences, helped bury the preacher, who died 2 nights after the fire, lungs scorched from smoke, faith burned away with the chapel walls. Alira stood at his grave with the twins. Didn't cry, just held her son's hand and whispered, "You'll remember the names they tried to erase." She didn't mean the preacher. She meant herself, her children. Every soul marked as collateral. And Kalen heard it. Not just her voice, her vow. The mayor's house stood empty. The carriage men had vanished like breath in winter. No one saw them leave, but by the time the town rose after the 5th day, their tracks led east. Mud churned deep, as if they'd run faster than dignity allowed. No bodies. Kalen never spoke of them again. Alira asked once, "They just gave up?" He stared out across the horizon, chewing a stem of grass. "Men like that don't give up. They move on. Like wolves looking for thinner fences." She nodded slowly. "They'll try another town." He didn't deny it. By the 7th day, Gray Hollow met beneath the church ruins. No votes, no speeches, just conversation. They made new agreements. Not in ink, but in action. No more debt by blood. No more contracts in shadow. No more silence. Kalen stood at the back, said nothing. But when someone asked what the town would do if the outsiders came back, it was Alira who answered. "We don't wait to be rescued anymore." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. That night, Kalen built a fire outside the cabin. Not for warmth, for memory. He placed the old ledger in the flames. The one Drexler had once waved in his face. He didn't read it, didn't need to. Some books deserved to burn. Alira sat beside him, feeding Sila while Elin slept curled against her hip. "You never told me where you came from," she said softly. Kalen watched the fire curl around the pages. "I came from places where silence was safer than truth. And now," he met her gaze, "now I choose who hears me." They sat in quiet then. The kind of quiet that isn't empty. The kind that builds a wall against the dark. A week later, riders came. 3 of them, young, faces tight with fear. Hats too big, holsters too shiny. Kalen saw them from the ridge, didn't move, watched them dismount near the well. Alira stood by the porch with the twins. The lead rider called out, "We ain't here to fight." Kalen waited. "We heard what happened." The boy went on. Heard a woman stood up when no one else did. Heard the man next to her could silence a town with one stare. He stepped forward, slow. "We're looking for that town." Kalen finally descended the ridge. The boy flinched, but didn't run. Kalen stopped 2 feet from him. "Why?" The boy swallowed hard. "Because they tried to buy my sister 2 towns east. And I didn't know how to stop it." Kalen looked past him. One of the other riders was a girl. 14. Maybe, wary. Wild-eyed. The third was a black man with scars up his throat like vines. Kalen turned to Alira. She nodded. Stay the night, Kalen said. We'll talk in the morning. By the fire that night, Alira handed the girl a blanket, soft, smelled of sage and milk. The girl gripped it like a weapon. Kalen sat with the others. No speeches. No strategies. Just stories. One by one, the riders spoke. Where they'd come from. What they'd lost. What they were running toward. And Kalen listened. Then told them something simple. Most places don't need heroes. Just someone to say no. When it matters. He looked at the boy. You ready to say no? The boy nodded. Then we'll show you how. By dawn, they rode out. The girl smiled at Alira, a crack in her face where innocence used to live. The man signed something with his hands, then pointed to the twins and touched his heart. Kalen watched them disappear into the haze. Alira stepped beside him. You think they'll make it? Some will. And the rest? He didn't answer, but his fingers curled slowly, like they were remembering the feel of a trigger. More came, not all at once, but steadily. Mothers, sons, broken men, women with rage under their ribs, people who had been quiet too long and now shook with noise. Gray, hollow changed. It became something it had never been. A place not just to hide, but to rebuild. Alira became the voice. Kalen became the guard, and the twins, too young to know the cost, grew up hearing stories not of princes or fairies but of fire, of choices, of how silence can kill. They learned to speak early because they knew what it meant to be unheard. Kalen taught them how to fish, how to spot a lie, how to listen to wind and know when danger wore boots. Alira taught them how to draw breath without apology. One night, Alira found Kalen at the old ash tree. He stood over the spot where he had buried the knife. She stepped beside him. Thinking about digging it up? No, he said. Thinking about planting something else. She smiled. You ever want to leave? She asked. He looked at the sky. No, but I might ride again, one day. You'll come back? He turned to her. This is the only place I ever meant to be. She reached out, took his hand. Fingers worn, knuckles scarred. I think we were meant to find each other. I think the world tried real hard to keep that from happening, Kalen said. But it didn't. No, he said, it didn't. They stood in the quiet then, a quiet earned, behind them. The twins laughed. And the town that once sold its people now taught its children to fight. Not with fists. But with truth. And with fire if it came to that. Spring came slower to Gray Hollow than anywhere else. The wind didn't carry petals. It carried ash. Fields near the southern ridge bloomed late, where the fire from the church had licked the edge of the wheat and whispered to the roots. Kalen stood there one morning, watching the shoots rise anyway. Not in defiance, just in certainty. The land, like the people who now worked it, had forgotten how to surrender. Alira joined him just after dawn. The twins were still asleep, growing too big for the cradle and too loud for the cabin. They'll walk soon, she said. Kalen didn't look at her. He watched a hawk slice through the sky. And then they'll run. Will they ever need to? He waited. Then said, yes. It wasn't fear in his voice. It was preparation. And Alira felt it, not the threat, but the future. A future she would have to face whether she wanted to or not. Because peace wasn't something you planted once and forgot. It had to be weeded, guarded, watered with work. And some days, it had to be bled for. Later that week, a stranger arrived, not on horseback, on foot. She came from the east, clothes tattered from brush, blood dried in the crease of her jaw. One arm hung strange, like it no longer belonged to her. Kalen spotted her at the edge of the orchard that had replaced the gallows. Alira came too. They didn't speak until the woman collapsed. Kalen caught her, carried her to the cabin, washed the dirt from her skin while Alira stitched her shoulder. She had no name. Or maybe she wasn't ready to give it. She had only one message: they're hunting you. Elira froze. Kaylin leaned in. Who? Drexler's men. Not the ones you chased. Others. Paid in full. Not for collection. She swallowed blood. For vengeance. The council met that night, not at the church. It was gone, but beneath the sycamore tree at the edge of the square, where light hit the bark just enough to let truth bloom without catching fire. 23 people sat in silence, while Kaylin explained. He didn't offer comfort. He offered fact. They'll come. Fast, trained, expecting fear. Martha Frayne asked the first question. Will they hurt everyone? Kaylin nodded. If we let them. Silas, the old blacksmith, leaned forward. Then what do we do? And that was when Elira stood. She hadn't meant to. She never did, but her voice was already rising before she realized she was speaking. We fight different this time. We don't wait behind doors. We don't cry after the fire. We meet it with buckets. We meet it with names. They're hunting shadows. Let's show them daylight. Kaylin looked up at her. The wind caught her shawl. The fire in her eyes made every person there remember why they'd followed her in the first place. The traps went in first, not simple ones. Kaylin had learned from places that didn't show up on maps. He taught the town how to lace wire through fence posts, how to rig bells without clatter, how to coat iron nails in root rot so even a scratch would fester. Elira taught something else, how to read breath. She stood with the children, mothers, and the old, showed them how to move without panic, how to carry fire without fear. She took a branding iron from Silas and marked an old oak in the center of the square, not with a name, with a promise. 2. Interlocked hands. No chains. No flames. Just unity. Some said it looked like a mother holding her child. Some said it looked like Kellen's grip on his knife. Maybe it was both. 3 nights later, the sky broke open. No storm. Just riders. 5 of them this time. Fast, armed. But they didn't know the path. The lead horse hit the wire trap near the mill. Legs tangled. Rider thrown. He didn't rise. The second veered, but his horse struck a spike buried just beneath the leaves. Hooves snapped. Screams filled the trees. By the time the others reached the square, they were bloodied and half-panicked. Kaylin stepped out from the alley near the forge. Gun drawn. Elira stood across the square. Rifle steady, the riders froze. The man in the center, clean coat, gold ring on his finger, eyes like winter, spoke first. You're Kaylin. No, Kaylin said. I'm who he regrets waking. The man laughed. You think you've built something new here? Kellen's voice was level. No, I think I buried something old. We'll burn it all. Then try. The man raised his pistol, but Kaylin didn't shoot first. Elira did. The bullet tore through the man's gun hand. Blood sprayed. His weapon dropped into the dirt. He screamed. Kaylin walked forward. You were warned. Another rider lunged. Mistake. Kaylin didn't aim for the chest. He shot the man's thigh, then his boot. Take your wounded. Leave the rest, Kaylin said, or we bury you here. Names uncarved, stories unspoken. The man staggered back. They left, not with dignity, with desperation. After, the town didn't cheer. They worked, cleaned the blood, repaired the traps, sat beside the wounded woman in the cabin and told her she was safe now. The twins watched it all. Elira knelt beside them. This is what safety looks like, she said. Not silence, not hiding. Just people who refuse to let each other be taken. Kaylin stood in the doorway. Elira turned to him. You believe they'll come again? He nodded. She rose. Then we'll teach them every time, Kaylin smiled. Just barely. You ever think you'd become the one people follow? No, she said, but I never thought I'd be hunted either. They stood together as the wind picked up, carrying dust and the scent of old ash. The world hadn't changed, but Grey Hollow had, and this time, no one would take that from them. They came again. 10 days after the last ambush, the dust rose beyond the eastern ridge. This time, the riders didn't sneak through the orchard or skirt the traps near the forge. They came in a line, deliberate, unhurried, 30 men, uniformed. Leather vests stitched with the Drexler seal D crossed, through a thorn vine. Kalen watched from the water tower. He counted every head, every rifle, every saddlebag too large for a day's ride. They weren't here for intimidation. They were here to finish something. He descended in silence. Alira met him at the crossroads. He didn't speak. She didn't ask. They already knew. Gray Hollow stood ready, not like soldiers, like people who'd buried enough of their own. The town hadn't raised a militia. It didn't have to. It had mothers who remembered how to break a man's nose with a skillet. It had fathers who'd once swung axes into timber harder than any skull. It had children who could signal in whistles that carried like wind. And it had Kalen. He stood in the middle of the square with Alira at his side. The twins were hidden, not out of fear, out of promise. Martha had them. Silas had the keys to the cellar. And the town had agreed on one truth. If fire came, it wouldn't burn down their future. The riders reached the edge of town just as the sun dipped behind the hill. Leader, an older man with silver hair and a coat that smelled of wax and blood, reined in first. Kalen recognized him, Thorn Maddox, one of Drexler's original enforcers. A man known in 5 counties and wanted in 3 more. "You're the one who started this," Maddox called, voice like gravel and whiskey. Kalen didn't move. "No, I'm the one who ended it," Maddox laughed. "You think this is over? This is just the ledger collecting interest." Alira stepped forward. "Your ledgers are dead. We burned them with your lies. You must be the girl," Maddox squinted. "Heard you had spirit. Heard wrong. This ain't spirit. This is suicide." Kalen raised a hand, calm, silent. Behind him, townsfolk moved into place. Shutters lifted. Barrels turned. Tools glinted. Not a weapon in sight that hadn't been held with work-worn hands. "We're not dying here," Kalen said. "But you might." The standoff cracked first with a whistle, then a shot. Not from Kalen, from a boy on the roof of the general store, one of the orphans taken in by Alira after the first raid. His bullet hit the ground at Maddox's horse's hooves. A warning, the poku. Horse reared. Maddox cursed. Men fanned out, and then the square exploded, not with fire, with sound. Pots banged, bells rang. Horns from old wagons shrieked. From every window, from every wall, from every alley, Gray Hollow erupted in noise. The Drexler men paused. Just long enough. Kalen fired. The first bullet struck, a rifle clean out of its owner's hand. The second hit Maddox's saddle. Then came the traps. Barbed wire dragged by horses yanked through their line. Tripwires snapped. 2 men went down hard, limbs twisted beneath them. Alira moved with grace, rifle resting on the porch rail of the old apothecary. She didn't shoot to kill. She shot to change minds. Within minutes, 6 men were down, none dead, all disarmed. Still, Maddox stood. He drew slow, not from panic. From pride. Kalen didn't blink. "Draw," Maddox growled. "You first. You scared?" "No, just patient." They moved at once. 2 guns barked. 1 man staggered. Maddox dropped to a knee, blood blooming from his side. Kalen remained standing. Not untouched, but unbroken. The Drexler men looked around, not at their leader. At the people they'd come to crush. At a town that wouldn't flinch. One by one, they dropped their weapons. And Gray Hollow stood taller for it. They buried the wounded, tended to the rest. Maddox survived, barely. Kalen sat beside him in the barn, where they kept the worst of the injured. "You'll hang for this," Maddox rasped. "No," Kalen said. "I'll testify." Maddox's eyes narrowed. "To what?" "To the truth, that you came to kill a woman and 2 children, and got your pride broken instead." 2 weeks later, federal marshals arrived, not because they cared, because too many men had started talking. Drexler was gone. Fled east, his name dragged through mud he'd never crawl out of. Gray Hollow testified. Kalen stood before the circuit judge and read names from memory. Not of enemies, of the lost, men sold, women forgotten, children branded with someone else's future. Alira stood beside him. She said only one thing. "We're done being owned." The judge ruled. The contracts were void. The land was returned. The names were cleared. And Gray Hollow began again. Not as a place to disappear. As a place to be seen. The twins walked for the first time that summer. Right across the town square. Elin reached Kalen first, grabbed his leg and laughed. Sela followed, stumbled, fell. Alira caught her. She looked up, wind catching her hair. Kalen met her eyes. "You still thinking about riding out one day?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not anymore." And in the stillness after the storms, with wheat fields rising from scorched earth and laughter echoing through rebuilt walls, Gray Hollow finally became what it was always meant to be, a home, not built by safety, but by those who fought for the right to stay. In the quiet that followed, Kalen found a bench beneath the sycamore tree. The brand Alira had carved, 2 hands, locked in defiance, still visible in the grain. He sat there, not to guard, not to plan, just to rest, and behind him the town lived. Fall found Gray Hollow wrapped in gold. Leaves dropped in slow spirals over rebuilt porches and cleared lots. The wind no longer whispered warnings. It told stories now low and warm, like an elder's voice after supper. A quiet peace had settled. Earned not through treaties or distance, but through scars that still ached when the nights grew long. Kalen rarely spoke anymore. Not because he had nothing to say, because he didn't have to. He'd walk the length of the town every morning. From the new stables, where Silas now taught 2 teens to shoe horses without flinching, to the repainted schoolhouse where Alira had started lessons under the wide front windows. And each time someone nodded at him, he nodded back. That was enough. Cabin had changed, bigger now. 2 rooms, one for the twins. A real chimney. Clay from the western ridge sealed the stone with a reddish hue that caught firelight and kept it close. Alira worked in the garden. She'd taken to growing fennel, and time said it helped her think. Kalen built furniture in the back, carved a bench for the porch, rough at the edges but solid. The twins ran through the fields like they belonged there, because they did know. One asked questions anymore. No one watched them from behind curtains. Their names were known. Sila with the laugh like wind chimes. Elin with fists full of gravel and a heart that melted at rabbits caught in traps. And sometimes Kalen would pause, see their shadows at sunset, and wonder how long he could keep this going. Not because he feared it would end, because he feared he might not be enough to keep it. Then came the letter, folded, sealed with no mark, placed under the handle of the well bucket before sunrise. Ira found it, opened it, read it twice. Then a third time, Kalen knew something was wrong by the way she turned. Trouble? He asked. She nodded slowly. Not for us, for others. He reached for the paper. She didn't hand it over. Another town. South of here. Small. Quiet. Same pattern. Outsiders with land deeds and charm. Promises of trade and safety. One mother. Missing. Then another. Kellen's jaw worked. You think they're from Drexler's camp? No. Her eyes were hard. I think they learned from him. Kalen stepped back, looked at the ridge. How far? 4 days' ride. And you want to help? No, she said. I want to stop it before it's our turn again. They didn't pack much. Alira left the twins with Martha. Kalen took his old knife, the one he hadn't buried, but hung in the barn under a coil of rope. They rode under cloud cover. No banners, no plan but motion. No allies but instinct. Every town they passed looked the same. Weather worn. Dignified. tired. But one, just before the southern bend, held something colder. No children outside. No dogs barking. Just eyes. Watching. They found the woman on the third day, hidden in a root cellar beneath her cousin's barn, bruised, half-starved, but alive. They said they owned my baby, she whispered. Said I signed. But I never held a pen. Elira took her hand. Kalen walked out and didn't come back for an hour. When he returned, his knuckles were bloodied. No one asked what he'd done. No one had to. They lit a fire in that town. Not a real one. A fire of resistance. Elira stood on the porch of the general store and told every soul that silence didn't buy peace. It just sold it slower. She didn't ask them to fight. She reminded them. They already were. Kalen left 5 traps behind. 2 were visible. The rest were for anyone foolish enough to test the edge of town. When they rode back into Gray Hollow, the twins ran to meet them. Sila hugged Kellen's leg. Elin clung to the stirrup. Elira scooped them both up. Dirt and all. Martha stood behind them, arms crossed. You bring trouble with you? She asked. No, Kalen said. We left it in the right hands. He nodded toward the south. They'll hold the line now. And you? Kalen looked at all IRA. Then at the town. Then up at the sky, where storm clouds had once brought fire but now just promised rain. We build. Later that night, Elira sat at the table writing a letter. To no one in particular, but to anyone who needed it. A warning, a map, a story. She left it unsigned, because the truth doesn't need names to walk. It just needs legs strong enough to carry it. Winter came hard, not like a whisper or warning, but like a slammed door. The sky turned pewter. The river glassed over. Trees stood like bone, stripped and silent. Gray Hollow did what it had always done, endured. But this year something was different. No one huddled in fear. They gathered, shared, remembered. And when the snow came, it came on top of laughter, not over screams. Kalen taught Elin to track rabbit prints in the frost. Elira taught Sila to read under the quilt by lantern. Glow. And for the first time in years, the night didn't feel like a threat, but with cold comes memory. Kalen dreamed more often. Not the kind that comfort. The kind that carved. Faces long dead. Fires long smothered. He would wake before dawn and walk the ridge until the dark let go. One morning, he found Elira waiting. She had coffee, a blanket. And a question. How long? Can we do this? Kalen didn't answer right away. The world's still bleeding, she added. Even if we're not. He looked out over the valley. Then we teach others how to stop the cut. That winter, Elira began sending letters, each one handwritten, sealed with a pressed flower from her garden. No name. Just stories, some towns. Ignored them. Some didn single quotes. T.1 wrote back. Come spring, it said. We'll have questions. Elira smiled when she read it. Kalen just nodded. Spring didn't arrive like before. It cracked. The ice on the river split like ribs. The snow melted fast, turning paths to mud. Life surged in messy, glorious bursts. And with it came visitors. Not writers. Not collectors. Teachers. Farmers. One midwife who said she'd seen too many towns crumble and too many mothers vanish without cause. They stayed, not because they were safe, because they wanted to make something safer. Kalen built a schoolhouse, bigger than the last. Elira taught half the week. The midwife taught the rest. The twins ran wild between chores and lessons. Elin still threw rocks. Sila now threw opinions. Kalen carved a new sign for the front gate of the town. Gray HOLW underneath. It's smaller. Silence is not peace. One day, a man arrived with nothing but a mule and a scar running from lip to ear. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Kalen met him by the well. They nodded. That was enough. Later that week, the man helped dig post holes, Fixed the chapel's broken beam. Repaired the hinges on the cabin door without being asked. Elira left him bread. He left her a carved wooden pendant in return. Sila wore it like a badge. Trouble didn't vanish. It never does. One afternoon, a boy showed up carrying a broken rifle and a look too old for 15. Said he walked from the east 3 days through swamp and silence. They took my mother, he said. Then they took my sister. Kaylin crouched. Who? Men in coats. One had a whip made of cord. Said it was for those who forgot their debt. Kaylin didn't hesitate. He looked to Elira, and she nodded. They rode again. Just the two of them. This time. They brought supplies, letters, seeds, blankets, but also rope. And Kellen's old knife. The town they reached had no name, just shacks lined in rows like forgotten teeth. The people there didn't speak much. Their eyes had forgotten how. Elira stood in the center and told stories. Kellen waited in the shadows. When the man with the cord came out to watch, Kaylin walked right up to him, didn't speak. Just cut the cord in half, right in front of everyone. Then handed the pieces to the boy. Bury it, he said. The boy did, and the people began to speak again. They returned a week later. Kaylin didn't say much on the ride home, but when they arrived, the town was buzzing. 2 new families. 1 wagon of tools. A preacher, not the hellfire kind. The kind that wore boots with holes and held sermons under the open sky. He asked Kaylin if he believed. Kaylin shrugged. I believe in dirt and fire and not giving up. The preacher smiled. That'll preach just fine. Sila turned 6 that summer. Elin turned 6.5, he insisted. They invited the whole town to the field. There were pies, dances. Someone played a fiddle so bad it turned into laughter. Someone else brought fireworks. Kaylin stood at the edge of it all. Watching, not as a guard, but as a man who never expected to live this long. Elira came up beside him, handed him a piece of cake. He took a bite. Didn't smile, but didn't stop chewing. She leaned in. You ever think we'd get here? He looked at her, at the town, at the 2 children racing through wildflowers like they owned the horizon. No, he said. Then added, but now that we have, I'm not giving it up for anything. And behind them, the people of Grey Hollow laughed into the sky. No longer forgotten. No longer afraid. Just living. The wind changed again, not sharply, not with warning, just a slow curl of chill through the valley, the kind that made people pause mid-sentence and glance at the trees. Something was coming, but it wasn't danger this time. It was decision. Kaylin stood at the river, flat stone in hand. He tossed it once, twice, then let it go. It skipped 3 times. Enough. Elira found him there. Always did when he wandered too far. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him. He finally spoke. They asked again. Who? The town council in Redwater. They want help setting up their defenses, teaching their youth. They sent a rider this time, with coin. Elira didn't move. Are you going to take it? Kaylin let the silence speak for a while. Then, I don't care about coin. But maybe it's time we stopped waiting for letters and started writing them. Elira turned to him. We built Grey Hollow because we had to. Now it stands because we chose to. What if the next place has neither? Kaylin glanced downriver. Then we give them both. Preparation began like all change. Quiet. Kaylin didn't pack. He built. He replaced the hinges on the barn, sharpened every tool, mended the fences by hand, 1 plank at a time. Elira did the same in her way. She taught 3 girls how to plant thyme in cold soil, showed 2 boys how to mix ink without blotting the page, left letters for the towns they'd never seen tied in twine, stacked in the chapel. She made sure Martha knew which blanket the twins loved best. She made sure Sila knew how to braid her own hair. She made sure Elin knew where to find the extra biscuits. She made sure they'd be fine, just in case. They left at dawn. Didn't say goodbye, didn't want the twins crying, or worse trying to follow. Just a note on the porch. We'll be back when the next town can sleep. And beside it, Sela's wooden pendant. Kalen tucked it in his coat. Redwater was nothing like Gray Hollow. Larger, colder, noisy. People. There spoke like they were waiting to be interrupted. The children didn't run. They watched out the men who met. Them wore polished boots and thin smiles. But they were honest. Or scared enough to act like it. We heard what you did. We want the same. Kalen didn't answer. Alira did. You want safety. We're offering responsibility. That's heavier. The mayor, young, sharp-chinned, hands too clean, nodded. We'll carry it. Just show us how. They started with stories. Kalen told them what silence costs. Alira told them what speaking up demands. Then they built traps. Simple ones. Not for violence, just for teaching. Children began to follow Alira. Teenagers followed Kalen. At night, they sat on the roof of the town hall, watching. Stars that looked smaller than they did in Gray Hollow. Alira leaned her head on his shoulder. You miss it? Every step. Me too. The second week, trouble came. Not loud, just a whisper. A woman with blood on her apron and no shoes. They took my husband. Said he owed for the plow. He didn't. Kalen followed her. They found the men camped 2 miles outside town. 5 of them, uniformed, relaxed. Kalen didn't draw. He walked in and stood by their fire. Give him back. They laughed. One reached for his holster. Kalen stepped on his hand. Broke. 2 fingers, didn't flinch. They handed the man over. He was bruised, but breathing. Kalen helped him up. Didn't say a word, but the message stayed behind. Redwater changed. Slowly. Then all at once, someone painted a wall with the image of 2 hands locked together. No chain. No fire. Just unity. Someone else carved a sign. We don't wait to be saved. Alira smiled when she saw it. I think we did good. Kalen nodded. But we're not done. They returned to Gray Hollow 3 weeks later. The town had grown. 2 more homes. Windmill Kalen hadn't built. And in the center of the square, a stone placed upright. Not a grave. A marker, etched with simple words. To those who stayed. And those who left so others could. Kalen stood before it, didn't move. Alira took his hand behind them. The twins came running. Wild and loud and full of stories. Elin shoved a lizard in his pocket. Sila held a notebook filled with drawings. Sun dipped low. Kalen sat on the porch, Alira at his side. The children between them. And for the first time in a long while, he let the stillness in. Not as a warning. As a reward. The world hadn't stopped bleeding. But here, in the place they chose, it had learned to clot. And sometimes, that was enough. It was harvest when the letter arrived. Carried not by rider, but by wind. Found folded inside a sack of barley from the northern valley, neatly sealed. Scrawled in ink the color of rust. Lir read it first. Didn't say anything, just held it. Kalen. Found her an hour later, sitting under the oak where the gallows once stood. She handed him the paper, his brow furrowed with each word. They didn't speak until the leaves fell around them. Then she said, quietly, they want us to come. Kalen looked toward the ridge beyond Gray Hollow. Not to help, she added, to lead. The town of Stonecross had no walls. No defenses. No direction. Just questions. It lay nestled between hills choked with coal dust and riverbeds, dry from greedy canals upstream. The people there looked worn, not beaten, but bent. Alira and Kalen arrived as guests, but within a day, the town treated them like the weather inevitable. Stonecross was not lawless. It had lawmen, paid by men richer than the earth. One night, a boy named Milo knocked on their door. His mother had been taken, again, for debts. Kalen stood, already reaching for his coat. Alira placed a hand on his arm. Not this time, she said. Let's not burn it down before we plant. So they waited. Spoke. Listened. And then moved. They gathered 10 women in the church basement. To pray. To organize. Each had lost something: land, kin, silence. Alira taught them how to braid their stories into a net. Kaelin stood at the door, teaching their sons how to see shadows before they arrive. And when the next collector came, swagger thick, boots shined with stolen hope, he was met with silence, not fear. Readiness. He left empty-handed. Word spread faster than ash. Gray Hollow waited. 3 weeks passed. Then 4. Martha wrote, "The twins miss you." Sila says Elin tried to set a trap for the new teacher. It worked. Kaelin smiled when he read it, then folded it and placed it in the fire. Not to forget. To protect. Stonecross changed. The women printed pamphlets. The children sang songs in alleyways that mocked the rich. Someone painted a mural. A pair of boots beside a pair of bare feet, side by side. Kaelin found a note pinned to his saddle one morning. "We see now. Thank you." He didn't show it to Alira. Didn't need to. She already knew. But not all saw clearly. One night, fire came. The old courthouse burned. No one died, but it wasn't an accident. The sheriff called it uprising. The mayor called it noise. Alira stood in the ash, turned to the crowd, and said only, "You get to choose who writes the story, them or you." They chose. A week later, the sheriff resigned. The mayor left town, and Stonecross planted its first field of barley in a decade. They named it Alira's Rise. She hated it. Kaelin carved the sign anyway. When they returned to Gray Hollow, the twins had grown an inch. Sila argued with a mapmaker who'd drawn their town too small. Elin taught a dog to howl when he clapped. They ran to their parents, like nothing had changed. And maybe nothing had. Except everything. At dinner that night, Kaelin spoke. "They'll keep calling." Alira nodded. "And we'll keep going. Even when it hurts? Especially then." They sat long after the plates had been cleared, the children asleep. The stars hung low, as if listening. Kaelin finally whispered, "What if we can't save them all?" Alira's voice was steady. "Then we save the ones we can, and make it easier for the next to save the rest." The next morning, Alira planted seeds at the edge of town. Not for food, for color. She said beauty was a kind of rebellion. Kaelin started building a new barn, even though they didn't need one. He said it was good to be ready. And from the ridge, Gray Hollow watched the horizon. Not waiting, welcoming. It was Sila who found the map. Tucked inside a cracked book on botany Alira had brought back from Stonecross. Pages brittle with age, words faded by time, but the map was drawn in ink sharp as fresh sorrow. A path winding south with markings of old towns crossed out, and one circled twice in red. Cherokee Hollow. Kaelin held the map beneath the lantern. "I know that name." "From where?" "Stories," he said. "The kind whispered by men who drank too fast and ran too far. They said it was where the first debts were made." Alira's eyes darkened. "Then maybe it's time the last ones were broken." Cherokee Hollow was older than any town they'd helped, but it looked dead. Buildings sagged like they mourned themselves. Fields overgrown with wheat too wild to harvest. A bell tower leaned sideways, its clapper stolen or silent. And yet, the people remained, pale, thin, quiet in a way that felt forced. Like sound had been outlawed. They watched Alira and Kaelin ride. In without curiosity, without hope. Just eyes, empty as winter. The first to speak was a woman, middle-aged, apron stained with something red. "Not blood, berries maybe." "If you're here to sell, we don't buy." Alira dismounted. "We're not here to sell." "Then why come?" Kaelin looked around. "Because someone should have." They stayed in an old room above what used to be a chapel. The floor creaked, the roof leaked, and the bed was made of straw and whispers. That night, they heard it. Not wolves, not wind. A scream, cut short, then nothing. Kaelin rose, grabbed the knife he never named. Alira followed with a lantern. They found nothing But the silence had changed. Now it watched them back. By morning, no one admitted to hearing it. Not the grocer with hands too steady. Not the boy who swept the inn. Steps with the same motion, again and again. Not even the woman with berry stains who said, "Old Towns Creek." Elira nodded, so do graves. They began their work anyway, not fixing. Listening. Elira offered books to children. No one took them. Kalen fixed the broken fence behind the school. No one thanked him, but on the third day, a girl left a drawing by their door. A house, a sun, and two people holding hands. On the fourth, someone repaired the chapel bell. No one rang it. Yet Elira found the truth first, buried in the mayor's ledger, left open on a desk too clean to trust. It wasn't a town. It was a contract. Every person there was listed by number, not name. Debts assigned, skills priced, family split. Kalen read it once, then folded it into his coat. "We burn it?" Elira asked. "No, we bury it, after they see." They called a meeting. In the square. Elira read from the ledger. Page by page. Name by name. Face by face. Kalen didn't speak. He stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes hard. At first, no one moved. Then the berry-stained woman stepped forward. "My sister's name isn't in there." Elira flipped pages. "She died," the woman said. Then, louder. "She died thinking she owed them." That night, the bell rang. Once. Then, again. Until the whole town gathered. Not in rage. In release. They burned the ledger in the square. No ceremony. No speech, just fire. Kalen dropped his knife in after it. They stayed one more week. Built a school bench, taught 2 girls to read, helped bury the bones someone had unearthed behind the mayor's house. When they left, the bell rang again. Softer. Hopeful. Back. In Gray Hollow, the fields were high and golden. Sela had written her first full story. Elin had trained a squirrel to sit on his shoulder. Martha had baked bread, so dense it bent Kellen's fork. He smiled anyway, because it was home. Because they were safe. Because for now, the wind carried no warnings, just news. And sometimes that was everything. The first snow came early that year, not heavy, but enough to coat the rooftops and hush the valley. Gray Hollow looked like a page out of a dream. Soft white, and still breathing. Kalen watched it fall from the porch, arms folded, jaw tight. Wasn't thinking about the cold. He was listening to the quiet. Elira had taken to writing every morning. Letters, lists, sometimes just lines of poetry she never shared. "You planning something?" Kalen asked one day, half teasing. She looked up, eyes sharp. "No, just remembering in advance." He didn't ask what that meant. He knew. Midway through December, the stranger arrived. No horse, no cart, just boots crusted with ice and a coat. Too thin for the season. His name was Jonah. Said it slow, like it tasted strange in his mouth. Silas spotted him first. "Mama, there's a man eating snow off the fence." Kalen came down the path with a rifle, not pointed, not raised, just present. Jonah didn't flinch. "I heard this was a place that didn't trade silence for survival." Elira stepped forward. "Depends what you're bringing in return." "Stories," he said, "and maybe a storm." They gave him a cot in the barn. Fed him stew. Gave him boots from the dead box behind the chapel. He didn't speak for 2 days. Then on the third night, he asked, "You ever heard of Calder's Bend?" Kalen stiffened. Elira sat up straighter. "Yeah," she said. "That's a name that shouldn't be spoken unless you're ready to bleed." Jonah looked at the fire. "They're still bleeding." Calder's Bend had a reputation. A town sold twice in the span of a decade. First to rail men, then to timber barons. Now, nobody owned it. Except fear. Kalen had passed through once, long before Gray Hollow. The streets were crooked, and the justice crooked further. He'd left without looking back, but now Jonah said children had been taken. Not missing. Taken. Their names are in books. He whispered. but no one's reading them. Kalen sharpened his axe. Alira packed 3 days' worth of supplies. Sela cried. Elin offered his slingshot. In case you see a real bastard. Kalen tucked it into his belt. Didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. They left as the snow thickened. Jonah rode with them halfway, then turned back saying, "You'll find the answers in the mine, but the questions are above it." They didn't ask what he meant. They were used to riddles disguised as roads, calders. Bend looked worse than Kalen remembered. Empty houses with curtains that twitched too fast. Shops with signs in 3 languages, but none in truth. And children who walked too quiet, eyes too wide. They didn't ask for help. Didn't know how. Lira found the headmaster first, not in a school, but in a tavern, drunk at noon. He laughed when she mentioned the missing. "We don't lose children. We just reassign them." Kalen stepped forward, said nothing, and stared. The man stopped laughing. Lira left the tavern with a list of addresses and a key. They started their 3 houses, 2 basements. 1 tunnel. Below the old church. They found the path, carved by hand, reinforced with old rail. And doors. 7 of them, each locked. Each cold. Inside, they found bunk beds, notebooks, drawings on the walls. No children. Only silence, until one door creaked, and a girl stepped out, eyes sunken, but defiant. She held a stick like a sword. "Are you the ones who break chains?" she asked. Kalen knelt. "If we are?" She lifted her chin. "Then I'll follow." There were 5 of them. Total. 2 couldn't speak. 1 couldn't walk, but all could still hope. They brought them out through the mine, up through a shaft sealed with rusted locks and lies. No alarms. No guards, just shame. That was enough. Kalen didn't fight anyone that night. Didn't need to. Alira left a note nailed to the tavern. "You don't know names." And now they're known. They left Calder's Bend before dawn. With 5 new shadows behind them, and not one regret. When they reached Gray Hollow, the town didn't ask questions. Just opened doors. Made room. Fed. Listened. That night, Kalen sat by the fire, Alira beside him. 5 children wrapped in borrowed quilts at their feet. He didn't speak, but his hand found hers and held tight. Outside, the snow continued to fall. And inside, the warmth kept growing. By the time the thaw came, the 5 children had learned to laugh. It didn't come easy. At first, their smiles were rare twitches more than expressions, as if their faces didn't know how to hold joy. But Alira sang while cooking, and Sela started putting wildflowers in their pockets. When no one was looking, Kalen taught them to whittle, not just to shape wood. To teach patience. To show them how to hold something sharp without letting it cut. Jonah never came back. No one expected him to. Some people arrive like sparks, just enough to light the way, then gone. Kalen found himself watching the ridge, more often. Not for danger, for invitation, but for the first time in a long while. The horizon didn't ask anything of him. It just glowed. That spring, Sela built a tower out of scrap wood and ambition. 3 stories high, no nails. Just twine, knots, and stubbornness. She called it the Watcher. Said it was to see storms. Before they came, Elin tried to add a slingshot turret. Kalen pretended to disapprove. Alira began teaching poetry. Not just the words. The weight. "You don't have to be loud to matter," she told the children. "You just have to mean it." One of the girls from Calder's Bend, Nara, wrote a verse about names. "They stole mine, but I made a new one from the sound of my own footstep." Alira read it aloud to the town. No one clapped. They just stood. Listening. Breathing. Alive. Martha opened a bakery. Finally. She called it Hollow Rise. The bread was uneven, the crust sometimes too dark, but it sold because people trusted hands that had held. Trouble didn't come in guns this time. It came in ink. A letter from the capital, addressed in elegant loops, stamped with a seal too ornate to be honest. Lia read it thrice. Kalen only once. They want to send inspectors, she said, to assess our developments. Kellen's jaw flexed. They want to own what they ignored. They called a meeting, not just Gray Hollow. They invited Redwater, Stonecross, the girl with the scars from Carrick's Hollow, even the midwife from 2 winters ago. They all came, sat on benches, crates, the dirt itself. Alira stood in the center. She read the letter, then burned it. Right there. And said, "We don't need validation. We need each other." No one argued, but someone brought wine. And someone else played a fiddle. It became a celebration. Because sometimes defiance looks like dancing. Kellen made a map. Not for war, for memory. He carved every town they'd touched into a broad plank of pine, tracing roads with scorched lines, marking rivers with blue chalk. At the bottom, he wrote, "Built, not bought." Elin asked if they could add more towns. Kalen smiled. "Only if you earn them." Silas started a journal. Every day. 1 page. Sometimes just a sentence, sometimes a sketch, sometimes nothing but a smear of berry juice. She said she was saving the days, in case she ever needed to go back and find one. Alira kissed her forehead. That's how you keep the past from getting lonely. Late one evening, a rider came. No insignia, just dust. He didn't speak until he'd eaten. Then he said, "There's a town in the west. Sunfall Ridge. They've got food, but no fire. People, but no purpose." Kalen looked to Alira. She didn't move. He asked, "Do we go?" She replied, "No, we teach others to go." The next morning, they picked 3 volunteers. 1 from Redwater, 1 from Stonecross. And Jonah's girl, Nara. Alira handed her a notebook. "Not for answers," she said, "for questions." Kalen gave her the compass he never used. "Don't follow it," he said. "Make it follow you." The 3 left that afternoon. Not as heroes. As echoes. Not to save. To show. That night, Alira and Kalen sat alone by the fire. No children. No noise. "Just warmth," she asked. "You ever think it would go this far?" He answered, "No, but now that it has, we don't stop." And as the stars came out one by one like slow burning truths they knew, Gray Hollow wasn't just a place anymore. It was a language, and others had learned to speak it. Summer came early. Not with fanfare, but with warmth that crept up the trees and whispered into the bones of Gray Hollow. Gardens burst without asking. Children shed their shoes before anyone told them to. And for a while, everything felt light. Kalen began to sleep with the windows open, not because he needed air. Because he trusted the dark. Alira had taken to walking at dusk. She said the quiet between day and night held more truth than most conversations. Sometimes she walked with Sila, sometimes with Martha, sometimes alone. One evening, she didn't return on time. Kalen found her standing at the edge of the ridge. In her hands, an envelope, sealed in wax. Colorless. Weighty. "I didn't open it," she said. "Not yet." He nodded, took it, cracked the seal. Read. Then sat down. Hard. It wasn't a warning. It was a plea. From a settlement none of them had ever heard of. Ravenshoe. Small, isolated, once a lumber camp, now just a name that whispered of rot. The letter said children had vanished, but no signs of violence. No footprints. No notes. Just absence. "They disappear in the fog," the writer said, "and no one remembers they were ever here." Kalen wanted to ignore it. Some things were too strange to fix, but Alira looked at him and said, "That's how they win. Not with fear, with forgetting." So they went. Ravenshoe looked like a town in hiding. Everything half covered in moss, doors left ajar, lamps unlit even after dusk. The people spoke in half thoughts, as if afraid full sentences would summon something. The mayor was a man named Brant, tall, thin, eyelids heavy with worry. He didn't greet them. Just handed them a page from his journal, a list of names. Each crossed out. Each one followed by a date. The inn was empty. Not vacant. Empty. No dust. Nowhere. As if someone cleaned constantly out of fear, not pride. Kaylin set their packs down. Alira lit a candle. "We're being watched," she said. "By who? Not who, what?" They stayed 3 days. Interviewed everyone. Heard the same thing over and over. I don't remember when they left, just that they did. No screams, no struggle. Just absence. And fog. Always fog. Rolling in, not from the river, but from the woods. Like breath, like hunger. On the 4th night, Alira stayed awake. Kaylin dozed beside her, a blade beneath the pillow. At midnight, the fog came, crawled beneath the doorframe. Coiled in corners, she heard a whisper, not words, music, off-key, childlike. She followed it outside. Found nothing. But when she returned, Kaylin was gone. She didn't scream. She wrote his name down in her notebook, to remember. Then she followed the fog. It led her to the lumber yard, abandoned. Tools scattered like forgotten prayers. In the center, a circle of stones. In the stones, names, etched, fresh. Kellen's wasn't there. Yet. She stepped inside. The fog thickened, then parted. And he stood there, not bound, not harmed, but blank, eyes open. "Soul missing, Alira," he said. Flat. "Leave." She didn't. She walked to him, took his hand, and whispered, "You don't get to forget me." She placed his name back in his palm. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then dropped to his knees. Behind them, the fog screamed, not loud, but furious. It recoiled. Alira knelt, holding Kellen's head to her chest. "Names are anchors," she whispered, "and you are not drifting." By morning, the fog was gone. Not faded. Destroyed. They burned the stone circle, carved the names into real wood, planted them like trees. Brant cried. He remembered his daughter. Her name was June. They stayed 1 more week. Taught the people how to write what they feared. How to speak what they lost. How to plant memory like seed. Then they left. No children followed. No one vanished. Only rain. Back in Gray Hollow, Kaylin woke every night for a week, gasping. Alira held him each time, not to fix. To anchor. To remind. And each morning, she whispered his name until he said it back. Kaylin built a bench beneath the oldest tree in Gray Hollow. Not for sitting, for remembering. It faced east, where the fog had once crept in, where the light came slow and certain every morning. He carved names into it quietly, one at a time. Not just the lost, but the found. Not just the saved, but the ones who tried. Alira never asked why. She just brought him tea while he worked. That spring brought with it something unfamiliar. Call on peace. Not silence, not stillness, but the kind of calm that lives between storms. And Gray Hollow grew. Not in size. In voice. People wrote more, sang more, built things without needing to explain why. Elin crafted a weather vane shaped like a fox. It pointed true. Silas started teaching a weekly class beneath the maple grove. Poetry and knots. For binding things you care about, she said. No one laughed. One morning, a wagon arrived. No rider, just a chest in the back. Inside, books. Hundreds, bound in red twine, smelling of cedar and secrets. No note, no sender, but stamped into the wood beneath them, for the ones who remember. Alira built shelves in the chapel. Kaylin reinforced the walls. It became the Hollow's first library. People called it the Heartwood. It fit. Martha passed that summer, quietly, in her sleep. A smile still on her lips. She'd told Alira a week before, "I don't want a funeral. I want a recipe." So Sela baked 6 loaves of bread. One from every place Martha had ever mentioned. Burnt the first 2. Nailed the last one. They gathered under the sky, shared slices, told stories. No black clothes. No speeches, just laughter. Because that's how you carry someone. Kellen grew quiet. Not sad. Still. He spent long hours on the porch, listening to the wind. Watching the road. One evening, Alira sat beside him. Didn't speak, just placed her hand on his dot. Eventually, he said, "You think it ends?" She looked at the stars. "No, I think it shifts." News from beyond came in stories now. Not letters, not warnings. People arrived with tailies. A boy in Redwater who started a school in his barn. A pill came in stories now. Not letters, not warnings. People arrived with tailies. A boy in Redwater who started a school in his barn. About letters, not worries. Not worries. Not simple. Arrived with tailies. A boy in Redwater who started a school in his barn. A barn. Woman in Calder's Bend who turned the jail into a greenhouse. A child from Ravenshoe who sang names into the wind each morning so they wouldn't be lost again. Kalen added those names to the bench, not because he knew them, because they mattered. Autumn crept in soft as breath. Leaves gold as fire. Sila's tower lost a rung. She rebuilt it stronger. Elin built a wooden squirrel. Said it was to remember the first friend he trained. Elira painted a mural on the side of the heartwood. It showed a road, splitting into 3. Then 5. Then 10, all leading out, none leading back. She called it Echoes Become Paths. One night, Kalen found a letter tucked in his coat pocket, small. Folded twice, not sealed, just signed, J. It read, "I never forgot, but I didn't need to return. You made remembering safe. That's rarer than fire." Kalen read it twice, then tossed it into the wind, watched it go. That winter, snow came heavy. But no one feared it. They had stories. Each other. One morning, Kalen and Elira woke to laughter. Outside, the 5 children from Calder's Bend had built a fort, named it Memory Keep. Elira smiled. Kalen nodded. It was a good name. When the thaw came, a new visitor arrived. Old, bent, eyes like soot and sky. She said nothing for hours. Just walked the town, touched the library door, the bench, the tower. Finally, she sat by the fire and said, "I was looking for a place that remembered. I found it." Elira poured her tea. Kalen offered bread. She ate in silence, then slept for 2 days. When she woke, she taught them a song. Old, wordless, but full of meaning. It echoed off the walls, the trees, the stones. The children sang it loud. The grown sang it soft. And that night, as Gray Hollow rested, the stars pulsed like breath. Alive. Enduring. Listening. The old woman's name was Hessa. She never said it aloud. Just carved it into a piece of driftwood she kept at her side. When Sila asked about it, Hessa smiled. "I've given it away too many times. I keep it close now." She didn't come to stay. She came to pass something on. Each morning, she gathered the children, not just the 5 from Calder's Bend, but others too, new ones who had arrived in Gray Hollow over the years like seeds. On the wind, she told them stories. Lessons. How to listen to trees. How to mark a trail with silence. How to speak names in ways even stone could. Remember. Lire called it magic. Hessa corrected her. It's memory with roots. Kalen didn't trust her, not at first. She asked too little, gave too much. But one day, he watched her mend a shattered mirror using only thread and pine resin. When he asked why, she said, "Because the truth still needs to see itself." After that, he carved her a bench. No name, just a swirl of knots. She nodded once when she saw it. The nights grew long again, not with threat, with memory. People took turns telling what they remembered, not always what happened, but what mattered. Boy recalled the day the fog tried to steal his brother. A woman spoke of a poem that stopped her from walking into a river. In Elin shy. Fierce Elin stood and said, "I used to think bravery was hitting things. Now I know it's staying." No one clapped, but someone wept. And that was better. Sila declared the start of the Hollow Festival. No one knew what it was. So she made it up. Games, riddles, bread baked in the shape of stars. A code zizbars. A comb no one knew what it was. So she made it up. Games, riddles, bread baked in the shape of stars. Scavenger hunt that led to the top of her tower, where she'd hidden the map carved into bark. It read, "Here be memories." People laughed for hours. It became an annual thing. One day, Hessa took Kalen aside, led him to the edge of the woods. She handed him a vial filled with black dust. "Not poison," she said. "Then what?" "Forget-me-not. Burn it when the forgetting tries to win." Kalen tucked it away, said nothing, but held it like truth. Alira wrote a book. Not for publishing. For holding. It had no title. Just a cover made from stitched leather and a spine bound in silver thread. Inside were drawings, poems, scraps of letters, dried flowers, pressed leaves, and fragments of names. She said it was her way of making Gray Hollow portable. In case the roads called again. They did. Not with violence. With voices. A pair of travelers arrived, young, tired, carried little. They said they'd come from the east, from a place where language had fractured and people only spoke in barter and bruises. They needed help. Not with food. With remembering how to be more than frightened. Gray Hollow opened its arms. And in doing so, stretched its roots. The library expanded. Not just with books. With people. A deaf girl from Redwater painted stories on its walls. A one-legged boy from Carrick's Hollow built ladders so even the smallest child could reach the top shelves. Someone named the new wing the Echo Room. The name stuck. Kalen spent more time walking with Alira. They spoke little. Held hands often. Sometimes they found new paths in the forest. Other times, the forest made new paths beneath their feet. Once, they came upon a clearing neither remembered. In its center, a stone etched with the words, "This was never forgotten." Just waiting. They sat beside it until the sun disappeared. Then left a candle. And walked home in silence. Hessa grew frail, but not weak. She moved like time had loosened its grip on her, and every step was a choice. One night she said, "I'm leaving soon." But not all of me. No one asked where she would go. They just listened as she sang the wordless song. And in the morning, she was gone. But her bench remained. And the driftwood with her name, and her teachings in the hands of children. Kalen scattered the forget-me-not dust at the edge of the ridge, not because he needed to, because he chose to. And when it rose like smoke, curling into shapes that almost spoke, he whispered, "We see you." Then turned away and walked back toward the light. It began with a sound, soft, steady, like a drumbeat made from breath. Sila was the first to hear it. She climbed the tower, pressed her ear to the wind, and listened. "It's not thunder," she said, "it's remembering." No one knew what she meant, but they believed her. Alira noticed it in the trees, the way they leaned east. Like they, too, were waiting for someone. Kalen noticed it in the firewood. Logs burned slower, steadier, like they wanted to last. The hollow had always had its own rhythm, but now it pulsed. One morning, the sky turned violet. Not storm. Not dusk. Just color. A child called it the breath of the world. And then a stranger came. No horse, no cart, just a staff made of ash and a voice full of gravel. He called himself Doran. Said he came bearing a story too. Old for pages. He stayed in the chapel, didn't ask for anything, just carved symbols into the floor while the wind howled outside. At first, Kalen didn't trust him. Too many strangers with buried truths. But when he watched Doran stitch a broken broom like it was a child's wound, he softened. "You heal things too?" Kalen asked. Doran only smiled. The next day, Doran gathered the town, not in the square. In the woods. By the creek with the red stones. He drew a circle in the dirt and placed a stone at its center. "This is not a ritual," he said. "It's a remembering." Then he sang. Low, deep, the kind of song that didn't need words because it already knew them. The ground shook. Not violently, like breath beneath the surface. Syl gripped Alira's hand. "What's happening?" Alira didn't answer. She just watched, because something was returning. not someone. Something. That night. The dreams came. Everyone. Children dreamed of walking roots. Elders dreamed of stars that hummed. Kaylin dreamed of a tree with a door in its trunk. Elira dreamed of a name written in fire. When they woke, no one spoke of it, but everyone began building a stage, a tower, a garden that spelled a word when seen from above. They didn't plan it, didn't assign it. They just moved. As if guided. As if memory itself had hands. Doran watched. Never interfered. He carved more symbols, shared more songs. Said less, because he knew what Elira knew. True remembering doesn't come with instruction. It comes with trust. One morning, the fog returned, but it didn't creep. It stood. Tall, quiet, waiting. At the edge of the ridge, just past the bench Kaylin built. It didn't move, didn't whisper, didn't threaten. It watched. Kaylin walked toward it. Held the vial of forget-me-not dust, but didn't throw it. He just said, "Not this time." And the fog bowed. Then drifted back. They called the festival the Long Echo. It lasted 3 days. Stories, dances. A feast made from everything they had left to share. People from 10 towns came. Old friends, names, children who remembered songs they'd never heard before. Silas' tower was lit with lanterns shaped like hearts. Elin read a poem about shadows learning to shine. Ira gave each visitor a page from her book. Kaylin gave them silence, the kind that holds meaning on the last night. Doran stepped into the circle he had drawn weeks before. Held up his staff and whispered a word no one understood, but everyone felt. Then he fell, not from pain, from peace. They buried him beneath the oldest tree, carved his name into the bark, then sang his song. The ground pulsed. Softly. As if grateful. Winter came again. Heavy, bright, but not cold. Gray hollow glowed from within. A town made not of stone or timber, but of names, of songs, of remembering. And in the center of the chapel, above the door, Elira hung a new sign. "We are still here." Kaylin smiled, and the trees bent in agreement. Spring returned as if it had never left. The river thawed with a sigh, like it too had been holding its breath all winter. Buds swelled on branches without needing to be told. The children chased bees. The elders planted stories. And for the first time in memory, nothing needed mending. Not the fences. Not the people. Just living. Elira began writing again, not poems, not chronicles. Letters. She addressed them to names she wasn't sure still lived, folded them without sealing, left them in the Hollows library beneath a sign that read, "If you know someone who needs to be remembered, carry this." And people did. One letter reached a town buried in sand. Another to a mountain camp where no trees grew. A third came back with a note attached. They remembered. Kaylin took to walking with Scylla. She asked questions he never expected. If the hollow vanished tomorrow, what would you miss first? He thought. Then said, "Your voice." She smiled. Then threw a stone so far into the river, it disappeared without a splash. "That's my answer too," she said. The bench beneath the old tree filled. Not with people. With names. Too many to fit along the seat. So they started carving the trunk behind it. Carefully. Respectfully. Like writing into skin. Evelyn started a ledger to keep track of them all. "One day," he said, "we'll run out of space." Kaylin replied, "Then we carve mountains." A girl named Min from Ravenshoe built a telescope. Didn't tell anyone why. Just pointed it at the sky each night. One evening, she called Elira over. "See that?" she asked, pointing at a tiny blue glimmer. "It moves," Elira whispered, "because it remembers we're watching." The midwife from Redwater brought seeds from a long-dead tree. Said they found them in the cracks of old stone. Kaylin planted one behind the chapel, watered it each day. It didn't sprout for a month. Then it did. White leaves. Sharp scent. No one named it. It named itself by blooming. Children began drawing their dreams, pinning them to a line that ran through the Heartwood Library. Some showed towers taller than clouds. Others homes with faces. One picture was just a name. Jonah. Lyra found it, tucked it into her pocket, didn't cry, didn't speak. Just held it. A traveler brought a drum made from glass. When struck, it sounded like rainfall. They stayed one night. Played once, said only, I dreamed this place before. I saw it. Then left, and the sound lingered. Syla called a gathering, not a meeting. A listening. Each person came with something to say, but no one could speak until the sun touched the tower. Then, one by one, they shared, I remember my mother's laugh. I remember a hand that never let go. I remember forgetting and being forgiven. When the last voice faded, no one clapped, but the air felt heavier, like it had finally heard. Enough to rest. Kalen stood beside the tower, looked at what they had made, not a town. A promise. Not walls. Roots. He turned to Lyra. Do you think it'll last? She didn't answer. She just kissed his cheek. Then whispered, we did. The next morning, the bench was gone. No wood. No carvings. Just a circle of wildflowers where it once stood. And in the center, a stone, etched with 2 words. Keep going. No one rebuilt it. They let it stay gone. Because remembering isn't always holding. Sometimes. It's letting grow. The library doors remained open. Always. Rain never touched the pages. Because stories know how to wait. Children grew tall. Old ones grew slower. But no one grew apart. The road that brought them all once now carried others. People searching, not for safety, but for meaning. And they found it. In a place that remembered without keeping. Loved without owning. Held without gripping. On the last page of her book, Lyra wrote a sentence. We were never saved. We chose to stay. Kalen added a line below it. And in staying, we saved ourselves. They placed the book on a pedestal in the echo room, not behind glass. Not under lock, but open. So anyone could turn a page or write one. Gray Hollow didn't end. It echoed. And somewhere, far beyond the trees, another voice whispered, I remember, and began to build.